"You're not even her real granddaughter," my father shouted, his face red with anger. "Only people who are really part of the family get the Ashwin fortune." I froze. My legs felt like they had turned into stone. I was standing in Grandma Mellison's study, a big room full of tall bookshelves. The shelves were packed with old, heavy books, the kind with leather covers and gold letters. They looked at me like they were watching everything that happened, quiet and serious, like they knew secrets I didn't. Grandma had only died 3 days ago, and already the family was starting to fight over her will. "What do you mean?" I whispered, my voice shaking so much I could barely speak. My heart was beating very fast, like it wanted to jump out of my chest. "Don't act like you don't know, Mirabelle," my father said, pacing back and forth across the fancy rug. His shoes made soft thumps on the floor, but each step sounded loud to me. He stopped suddenly and looked at Grandma's big portrait on the wall. She was smiling in the picture, looking kind and calm, but I could see her eyes watching us too. "Your mother had a secret," he said, "and now everyone knows. Once the lawyer checks, you won't get anything if you aren't really a Ashwin." I tried to make my voice steady. "Do you promise me," I asked, "that only real Ashwins get the inheritance?" "Absolutely," he said, lifting his chin the way he always did when he wanted to seem important. "The Ashwin family legacy will stay with real Ashwins, not imposters." But before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me where are you watching this from, and what time of day is it? I swallowed hard. My name is Mirabelle Ashwin. I'm 27 years old. Until 5 minutes ago, I had always believed Dorian Ashwin was my dad. But now, in my grandma's big, old house near Philadelphia, I was finding out that maybe he wasn't. I only wanted one thing, what Grandma Mellison wanted me to have. I wanted fair treatment, just like she had said in her will. She had spoken kindly about me in the past, telling the lawyer to make sure I got something. But my father, the man who had always seemed disappointed in me, was standing in my way, blocking me like a huge wall. "You can come to the reading next week if you want," he said, waving me off. "But don't expect anything. I've already spoken to Octavian about fighting anything that says your name." Octavian Larkspur was our family lawyer. He was my father's friend and someone I had met many times, but I never really trusted him. Hearing that they were planning something together made me shiver. "I'll be there," I said quietly. I had to. Grandma wanted me there. "Sentiment," my father scoffed. "Grandma always liked you too much. But the law doesn't care about feelings. It only cares about facts." He walked out of the room, and I sank into Grandma's desk chair. Her desk was shiny, polished walnut, the kind that felt smooth under your fingers. She had spent many years at this desk, writing letters, checking her papers, reviewing business matters, and finishing her will. I ran my fingers over the wood, remembering how it had felt under my hand when I was little, sitting beside her, listening to her stories. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from my mom. "We need to talk about your father tonight. Just us." A cold feeling ran down my spine. If my father wasn't my real dad, then who was? And why had nobody told me for 27 years? Why now, right after Grandma died and right before her money would be shared? I felt a knot of fear and anger twisting in my stomach. One thing was clear. My father had always been secretly angry at me, and now I understood why. Being a Ashwin was complicated. Our family was rich, and our wealth came from making medicines and investing in smart businesses. My father, Dorian, was the older son, which meant he was supposed to get most of the family money. His younger brother, Caspian, was very different. He was smart and talented, but also restless. He had moved to Seattle to do medical research, and only came home sometimes. I didn't know Uncle Caspian very well, but I remembered him as kind. He laughed easily, gave thoughtful gifts, and listened to me like what I said really mattered. My father, on the other hand, measured people by how successful they were. He expected perfection and looked disappointed almost all the time. My brothers Alaric and Leander had made him proud. Alaric worked with my father in the family business. Leander went to law school and did very well. I tried my best too. I went to college, graduated with honors, and had a good job restoring old buildings and historical places. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. "She lacks the Ashwin drive," my father had said once about me. Too soft, too slow, not strong enough. Those words had stung, but I didn't know until now that they were more than just insults. Grandma Melisande had always been my safe place. She liked my love for history and art. She encouraged me to follow my dreams, not the family rules. I visited her every Sunday, had tea with her, and listened to her stories about our family. She always said, remember, Mirabelle. A Ashwin makes their own path. Her death at 86 had been peaceful. But her absence left a big hole in my heart. I missed her so much. After the funeral, I noticed my father acting strange. He watched me closely. He whispered to the lawyer when I walked in the room. He would stop talking suddenly when I approached. At first, I thought maybe he was just grieving in his own way. Now I realized it was something more. The last time I had seen Grandma alive, she had held my hand tightly. She whispered, "Trust your instincts, Mirabelle. Not everything is as it seems." At the time, I thought she was tired. Now, I understood she had been warning me. When I left Grandma's study and went to meet my mom, I felt like I was stepping into a secret that had been hidden for decades. A secret that could change everything I thought I knew about my family. My mom was waiting in her favorite quiet cafe, tucked away in a corner of the city. She looked smaller than usual, her hair a little messy, and her eyes shadowed with sleepless nights. "I never wanted you to find out this way," she said, fidgeting with her wedding ring. "Your father shouldn't have told you. It was cruel and selfish." "Is it true?" I asked softly, my voice shaking. "He's not my real dad." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "It's complicated, Mirabelle. More complicated than your dad makes it sound." For the next hour, my mom told me a story that turned my world upside down. She and Uncle Caspian had loved each other before she met Dorian. They were young and happy, planning a future together. But then Caspian got a special research job in Seattle. They tried to make it work long distance, but it was hard. During a difficult time, my mom grew close to Dorian. One moment of weakness led to a brief relationship, but she ended it when she realized her heart still belonged to Caspian. When she discovered she was pregnant, she believed the baby was Caspian's child. Dorian insisted he was the father. He proposed marriage immediately. My mom agreed because she wanted stability for herself and the baby. Dorian wanted a wife and kids to protect the family fortune. At the time, my mom didn't realize it, but he was also thinking about money and position in the family. Years passed. The secret stayed hidden. Caspian moved back to Philadelphia, got married, and focused on his work. My mom never told him about me because she didn't want to disrupt his life. "Did Caspian ever know?" I asked. "No," my mom whispered. The news made my head spin. Every memory of my childhood suddenly needed to be thought about again. My father's coldness, Uncle Caspian's kindness, Grandma's special attention. All of it now made sense in a new way. "Why is Dad saying this now?" I asked. Mom's face got serious. "It's about Grandma's will. He's worried Grandma left you a big part of the inheritance. He wants to block it. But here's the thing," she took a deep breath. "You are Ashwin by blood, just not Dorian's child. You are Caspian's daughter. That makes you Grandma Mellison's granddaughter by blood. No matter what your dad says, that cannot change." I couldn't believe it. My father had tried to cut me out of the inheritance, thinking I wasn't a real Ashwin. But really, I had a strong claim through another part of the family. "What do I do now?" I asked, my mind spinning in circles. Mom held my hands tightly. "That depends on what you want, Mirabelle. Do you want justice? Recognition? Or just what Grandma intended for you?" I didn't have an answer yet. The betrayal was too fresh. The story is too big. But one thing was very clear. I would not let Dorian Ashwin rewrite my history for money. Now I had a plan forming in my mind. I needed to prove who my real father was before reading. And I needed to find out if that truth would help me claim what Grandma wanted me to have. I thought about Uncle Caspian. I remembered the times he visited, his warm smile, his easy laugh, and the way he had always treated me with respect. That was my real father. That was the family I belonged to, by blood and by heart. I thought about my father, Dorian, the man I had spent my whole life trying to please, who had never looked at me with real pride. I realized now it wasn't because I had failed him. It was because I wasn't his child. Grandma's words came back to me. Ashwin makes their own path. I would make my own path. I would find justice. I would honor Grandma's memory. I would not let greed and lies steal my rightful place in this family. I had to act carefully. The will reading was coming soon, and I needed proof of my real father before that day. I would need documents, maybe even a DNA test. I needed to show the lawyer, Octavian, that I was Caspian's child. That would make my claim unbreakable. I thought about my mother, who had kept this secret for so long. She had protected me and Caspian, even if it meant hiding the truth. Now it was time to use the truth as my shield. As I left the cafe, holding my mother's hand for comfort, I felt a new strength inside me. The Ashwin fortune, my father's anger, and the family's expectations were all part of a storm. But I was ready to face it. No one could stop me from claiming my place. I was Mirabelle Ashwin, granddaughter of Melisande by blood, daughter of Caspian by birth, and strong enough to take what was rightfully mine. The question now was simple. How would I prove it? And would my father's lies help me or hurt me in the end? But one thing was certain. I would not give up. I would fight for what Grandma wanted me to have. And I would make my own path, just like she said. The next morning, I got into my car and drove to Uncle Caspian's apartment. My heart was beating very fast, almost like it wanted to jump out of my chest. I had called him earlier, but I had kept the reason for my visit vague. I told him it was something about family matters, things that had to be discussed before we read my grandmother's will. Now that I was sitting in his small living room, surrounded by shelves of scientific journals, books with strange diagrams, and souvenirs from his travels all over the world, I felt nervous and unsure of how to start. I wanted to tell him something that could change both our lives forever, but the words stuck in my throat. "You look worried, Mirabelle," he said kindly, placing 2 cups of tea on the coffee table. His voice was calm and soothing, but it made my chest ache because I knew I was about to upset him. Caspian Ashwin was 58 years old, but he was still handsome. He had dark eyes just like mine. Every time I looked at him, I saw my own reflection, like looking into a mirror. That thought made me both happy and sad at the same time. "Is Dorian making things hard about Elanier's estate?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's more complicated than that." I started, but then I stopped. How do you ask someone if they might be your real dad without shocking them? My hands were sweaty, and I felt like my words could break the room if I said them wrong. "Uncle Caspian, did you and my mom, were you ever together before she married my father?" I asked, my voice trembling. His cup of tea froze halfway to his lips. I could see the surprise on his face turn into something else, a careful, guarded look, like he was trying to protect himself. "Why would you ask about something that happened so long ago?" he said softly, still watching me closely. "Because Dorian told me he isn't my real father," I said, my voice shaking a little. "And now he's using that to try to stop me from getting my grandmother's inheritance. He says I don't belong to the Ashwin family." Caspian put down his cup very carefully, like he didn't want to spill a drop. "That sounds like Dorian," he said. "Always thinking carefully, even when he's being mean." He leaned forward, his dark eyes staring into mine. "What did your mother tell you?" I took a deep breath and told him everything my mother had said about their past relationship. As I spoke, I watched Caspian's face change. First, he looked sad as he remembered old times. Then, something like hope flickered in his eyes. Finally, he just sighed. "I never knew," he said quietly. "Lenora never told me she was pregnant. By the time I heard she had married your father, it was already done." He leaned forward a little more. "Mirabelle, are you saying you think I might be your real dad?" "Yes," I whispered. "The timing matches what my mom told me. But Dorian is determined to prove I don't have any Ashwin blood, so he can take me out of the inheritance." Caspian's face grew darker, serious. "Elaniers will mention your name. Dorian can't just remove you from it. He says he can challenge it because she thought I was his daughter," I explained. Caspian got up suddenly and began pacing the small room. "This is absurd," he said, more to himself than to me. "Even if Dorian isn't your biological father, you are still Elanier's granddaughter if you are my daughter." He stopped and looked directly at me. "We need to know for sure. A DNA test will tell us the truth." I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. It was scary to finally get the answer, but also a little comforting. "You take a DNA test?" I asked hesitantly. "Of course," he said without hesitation. "I've always felt a connection to you that I couldn't explain. If you really are my daughter, let's just check and be sure first." We arranged for an expedited DNA test that very day at a private lab. The lab said they could give results within 72 hours, just enough time before the reading. As we gave our samples, a strange feeling settled in my stomach. Part of me was excited and part of me was scared. No matter the results, my relationship with Dorian and Caspian would never be the same. While waiting for the results, I tried to gather information about my grandmother's will. I called her personal lawyer, Gideon Blackwood, who was different from the family lawyer, Octavian Larkspur. "I'm afraid I can't discuss the specific provisions before the official reading," Gideon told me when I visited his office. "But I can assure you your grandmother was of sound mind and very clear about her intentions." "Did she know about my real father?" I asked directly. Gideon's expression stayed neutral for a moment, but then his face shifted slightly. "I cannot comment on that," he said carefully. But I will say that Eleanor was very perceptive. Very little escaped her notice. His answer told me everything I needed to know. My grandmother had probably suspected, or maybe even known, that Caspian was my real father. My small sense of victory, however, quickly disappeared when I received a formal letter that evening. Octavian Larkspur had petitioned the court to delay the will reading because of questions about the identity of certain beneficiaries. Dorian was moving faster than I expected. He was using his legal connections to buy time while he tried to make his case against me. When I called Gideon to ask about the delay, his secretary informed me that he had been suddenly hospitalized with pneumonia and would be unavailable indefinitely. This didn't feel like a coincidence. Dorian was systematically removing anyone who could help me or give me information. Without Gideon or the DNA results, I would face the will reading at a severe disadvantage. That night, my mother called in a panic. "Dorian knows you met with Caspian. He's furious," she said, her voice shaking. "Mirabelle, be careful. When Dorian feels threatened, he becomes dangerous." 2 days before the rescheduled will reading, the DNA results arrived through a secure, encrypted email. My hands shook as I opened the file. I scanned the numbers and scientific terms, searching for the part that really mattered. And then I saw it: probability of paternity, 99.9998%. Caspian Ashwin was unquestionably my biological father. I felt a flood of emotions: relief, grief for the relationship I never had, anger at Dorian for lying all my life. Something that had been a distant possibility now became concrete truth. I immediately called Caspian, and he answered quietly. "I suspected it from the moment you asked," he admitted softly. "You have your mother's smile, but your eyes, they're Ashwin eyes, my mother's eyes." We agreed to meet before the will reading to discuss how we would handle the situation. With DNA proof in hand, I finally had leverage against Dorian, or so I thought. That evening, Octavian Larkspur requested an urgent meeting at his office. Despite my nervousness, I agreed to go. His office was elegant and old-fashioned, full of leather furniture, polished wood, and shelves of law books. Octavian himself looked perfect in a silver-gray suit, but there was something in his eyes that didn't seem friendly. "Mirabelle, thank you for coming. I thought we should discuss certain developments before the reading," he said, motioning me to sit. "Do you mean the fact that Dorian isn't my biological father, or the petition to delay the reading?" I asked cautiously. Octavian's smile tightened. "Actually, I was referring to the DNA test you and Caspian arranged." My blood ran cold. How could he possibly know about the test? We had been so careful to keep it private. Octavian continued. "Dorian was quite upset to learn of this independent investigation," he said. "He asked me to convey a proposal to you." He slid a document across the desk. I picked it up and read. It was a waiver agreement. If I signed it, I would give up all claims to Eleanor Ashwin's estate, and in return, Dorian would pay me $250,000. "This is absurd," I said, pushing the paper back toward him. "Grandmother specifically included me in her will." "Yes," Octavian said smoothly. "But she did so under the presumption you were Dorian's daughter. Now that we know otherwise." I cut him off. "Now we know I am Caspian's daughter. That makes me even more legitimately an Ashwin granddaughter than if I were Dorian's. Blood relatives deserve the inheritance. Isn't that what Dorian always says?" Octavian's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "There are complexities you are unaware of, Mirabelle. Legal nuances regarding the Ashwin Trust superseded simple biology. Dorian could be quite aggressive in defending the family interests. The veiled threat made me uneasy, but I left his office determined not to give up. I would stand my ground." The next morning, Caspian called me again. His voice was tight, full of controlled anger. "Mirabelle, I've just received some disturbing information from an old family friend, a nurse who worked with my father decades ago." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Dorian isn't biologically Ashwin." "What?" I asked, my whole body trembling. The room seemed to tilt around me. "Apparently, my parents adopted Dorian as an infant after your mother had several miscarriages. When she unexpectedly became pregnant with you years later, they decided to keep the adoption quiet. They didn't want Dorian to feel like less than their son." The news hit me like a punch in the stomach. If Dorian wasn't a real Ashwin by blood, then by his own rules, he couldn't make me seem like the imposter. "Does Dorian know this?" I asked. "I don't think so," Caspian said. "Our parents took the secret to their graves. But Melisande might have known. She and your mother were extremely close." "That explains Octavian's confidence," I said slowly. Caspian nodded. "Exactly. I've been reviewing copies of the original Ashwin Trust. There is a clause requiring direct bloodline descent for principal inheritance. Dorian, being adopted, would have been protected legally. But by making this about biological legitimacy, he could accidentally disqualify himself. I felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. Dorian's attempt to disinherit me by questioning my biological connection to the Ashwin line could backfire badly if his own adoption came to light. What do we do with this information? I asked. Caspian was quiet for a moment. That depends on what you want, Mirabelle. What Dorian deserves and what is right for our family might be two different things. I thought carefully. Slowly, I said, people who insist on blood purity should be held to their own standards, don't you think? The morning of the will reading arrived. The sky was clear and Philadelphia's autumn colors were bright red, orange, and yellow outside my grandmother's mansion. I arrived early with Caspian. We shared a secret, a fragile weapon we weren't sure how to use yet. Octavian Larkspur sat at the head of the dining table, leather portfolio open. The room was filled with Ashwin relatives, everyone dressed nicely, looking serious. Dorian sat directly opposite me, his posture confident, flanked by my brothers who looked uncomfortable but determined to support their father. Before the reading began, Octavian announced, I must address a delicate matter regarding succession eligibility. Dorian straightened, shooting me a triumphant glance. It has come to our attention that certain beneficiaries named in Eleanor Ashwin's will may not qualify under the bloodline provisions of the original Ashwin family trust. A ripple of murmurs went around the room. My mother held my hand under the table tightly, trying to calm me. Octavian continued. As you know, Eleanor's estate is divided between assets she controlled independently and those governed by the family trust established by her father. The trust specifically requires beneficiaries to be blood descendants of the Ashwin line. Which is precisely why we need to address Mirabelle's situation, Dorian interrupted smoothly. Recent information suggests she is not my biological daughter, and therefore has no claim to the Ashwin inheritance. Gasps and whispers spread through the room. Caspian and I exchanged a tense glance. Our carefully planned strategy seemed suddenly at risk. Dorian slid a folder toward Octavian. Here is DNA evidence confirming Mirabelle is not my biological child. Under the bloodline requirement, she is ineligible for trust distribution. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at me. My hands trembled as I realized how serious things had become. The truth, the secrets, the lies, it all led to this moment. My heart was pounding so fast as Octavian looked at the papers. I felt like it was trying to jump out of my chest. We had thought we would be the ones to talk about who my real dad was, but Dorian had beaten us to it. He had his own test results. Tests I never agreed to. Tests I never gave my DNA for. Can I ask how you got my DNA for this test? I said, trying really hard to keep my voice calm. Dorian smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was cold and mean. From your water glass at our last family dinner. Very simple, he said. That's illegal, Caspian said. You can't take someone's DNA without their permission. It doesn't matter how it was collected, Octavian said, looking at the papers. The science is correct. The results are real. I felt my stomach drop. Our careful plan was falling apart. If Octavian believed Dorian's test, we wouldn't get the chance to tell the truth the way we wanted. I have my own evidence about the family, I said, pulling our test results out of my bag. DNA that shows Caspian Ashwin is my real dad. The room went completely silent. Everyone's eyes grew wide. Dorian's face turned red with anger, and he glared at my mom. But Mom didn't look scared. She looked calm and steady, like she had been expecting this. This changes nothing, Octavian said after reading our papers. The trust says that only blood from Melisand's family counts, and that goes through Dorian to his children. Caspian stood up slowly. He looked around the room, making sure everyone was paying attention. I think we need to read the trust carefully, he said. It says that the people who get the money must be blood relatives of Harold Ashwin, Melisand's father. That's a big problem. Dorian is not actually Ashwin by blood. He was adopted as a baby. Our parents never told anyone to protect him, but Melisand always knew. Dorian looked shocked. His face went pale. That's ridiculous, he finally said. A lie. I have the adoption papers. Caspian stayed calm. I also have DNA proof, he said, showing another folder. If we are only looking at blood relatives as Dorian wanted, then I am the only real child of Melisand, and Mirabelle, my daughter, is the only blood granddaughter. Octavian looked worried as he read the documents. He wanted to support Dorian, but also had to do his job. He seemed torn, and I could see him struggling with what to do. "This is outrageous," Dorian shouted. "I won't let you say these things. You're the one who said only blood relatives should get the Ashwin money," I said quietly. "Are you changing your mind now?" Before Dorian could answer, the library doors opened slowly. Gideon Blackwood, grandmother's lawyer, came in. He leaned on a cane, and his steps were slow but steady. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said, nodding at me. "I think I need to be here for this reading." Octavian looked upset. Gideon being here could ruin any plan Dorian had made while he was gone. The tension in the room grew. "I want to read the papers carefully before we continue," Gideon said as he sat down. He looked at all the DNA tests and adoption papers. Dorian suddenly looked scared. His plan was falling apart, and he didn't know what to do next. Gideon put on his reading glasses and carefully read the last pages of grandmother's will. His voice was calm, steady, and strong. "Before we talk about who gets what," Gideon said, "I must read a letter from Melisande Ashwin. She wrote this letter to be opened if there were ever questions about the family.